Welcome back to Neranenah Scholars. I'm excited to continue the conversation with Ben Sidran, and today we're going to be discussing Louis Armstrong and the Karnofsky family.
Oh, the shock has pretty deep, dear, and he shows them pearly white.
Well, should we touch on the Karnofsky family and Louis Armstrong?
That's a wonderful story. It really is. Louis Armstrong, kid, 6, 7 years old, growing up on the streets of New Orleans, father missing, mother gone most of the time, was kind of taken in by the family of Morris Karnofsky, a Jewish peddler who had a junk wagon who went through the Latin Quarter, the French Quarter. And he kind of befriended this little kid and took him on the cart, and then took him home at night and gave him food. And on Friday nights, this little kid, Louis Armstrong, had Shabbat. And Esther Karnofsky, Morris's wife, would sing lullabies to her babies. And years later on, Louis said that his first inspiration as a singer in music was hearing Mrs. Karnofsky sing these lullabies. What makes this story particularly important, also the fact that, the first trumpet that Louis Armstrong ever had was purchased for him by the Karnofskys at a pawn shop for $6. What makes this so important is that there's the received wisdom about Louis Armstrong does not mention the Jewish impact. It mentions this young kid out on his own, going to an orphanage, learning to play horn in an orphanage. And the entire Jewish experience is left by the wayside. And there may be many reasons for that. There certainly are many reasons for that. But among them is the fact that it doesn't fit so well into the myth of this music being completely and purely Black music. Of course, it's Black from its roots on up. But without a Jewish influence, we would not have the American popular music we have. We would not have the jazz precedents that we have. It's truly American music. When we talk about popular culture in America, we really are talking about this interaction between African Americans and Jews and Italians. I mean, it's what the great drummer Max Roach once said about the drum kit. It's totally inclusive. You have a tom-tom from Native Americans, you have a cymbal from Turkey, you have a snare drum from France. So the truth about the music that's grown up into all the Broadway music that we know today and the popular music, and American popular culture in general, is its inclusiveness. And in fact, today more than ever, I think that's an important idea to understand, because there's so much discontinuity now with the Black Lives Matter movement. What does that mean? Why are we talking about? Well, we're talking about Black Lives Matter, but at the same time, we're also talking about America, that in America, America was built on the backs of the African-American community. It physically was. But our culture and particularly our music remains, as Louis Armstrong's career did, as an amalgam of what happens when Blacks and Jews come together, and their histories come together, and they see how much they share in common. That's a backbone of who we are. Just another little anecdote about Louis Armstrong and the Jews. He talked about, he was said to be the first scat singer because of a song called Heebie Jeebies. And it was, again, the received wisdom as he was in a recording studio, the music fell on the floor, he started making up syllables, and that became scat singing. Where in fact, what Louis Armstrong said was, no, he'd been singing like that for years. It was his version of hearing Jews davening, but he never wanted to talk about it because he didn't want the Jews to think he was making light of their religious practices.
Yeah, when you speak about this American music thing, it kind of just reminds me, talking about, White Christmas or all these Christmas songs that Jews wrote, that Christmas in America must feel different than Christmas other places because of the feeling and that music that a lot of Jewish people have contributed to it. I don't know what that matters, or, it's not to say it's our music, but we've certainly contributed to the feeling of different.
I think both are true. I mean, you name a Christmas song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Name a Christmas song that was written by a Jew. It's so curious. And I think partly it's because the Jews didn't bring this ecumenical feeling into their songwriting. They wanted beautiful melodies, beautiful harmonies, images that spoke to kids and adults alike. So I think it does definitely feel different than Christmas in Norway or Christmas anywhere else. And you could call that a Jewish influence.
What would you say when, people say, well, they wrote all these great Christmas songs, but they didn't write a single Hanukkah song? Does that just show that it was a business?
Yes, and again, Irving Berlin said it, Gershwin said it, Dylan said, everybody said it. Being a Jew has nothing to do with my success. Jews don't want to talk about being a Jew. They don't want to bring attention on themselves. They don't want to bring attention to the issue of being a Jew or not being a Jew. This is really one of the interesting threads of the whole American experience, because on the one hand, they come here to be part of a crowd and to be accepted as part of a crowd. But on the other hand, the inclination is to deny a big part of who they are as valuable. They almost say it's trivial. It's curious, and there's really no way to totally unpack that except to say that has to be a result of thousands of years of keeping your head down and hiding and being isolated. And also, the Jews who wrote the songs, by and large, did come from the Pale of Settlement. They had not had citizenship there. They couldn't own property. They were really on the fringes. And so when they came to America, I don't think there was any desire at all to remember that experience or to bring it up. And I think that's kind of carried forward.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is the perfect place to put this, but, I relate to what you spoke about in your book about growing up kind of feeling related to a lot of these Black musicians. And, when I first heard Louis Armstrong, it felt familiar, even though it wasn't. And, is there, to you, I guess, do you hear similarities between blues or that and cantorial music, or what's the familiarity to you?
This is also another wonderful road to go down. And it reminds me of a story Harold Arlen said, where his father was a cantor. And when he played a Louis Armstrong record for his father, Arlen reports that the cantor leapt up and said, "Who is this man? He's stealing some of my licks." That Arlen's father heard cantorial turns of phrase in Louis Armstrong and felt that he had been spied upon or something. That's how close the music can be. And it's not just because there are minor tropes in both. I believe, that, for example, in recording studios, when you make a recording, and it's multi-track, which means you can erase and replace anything. And so if you have like 5 instruments and they play together, but you don't like the saxophone and you replace it, could sound fine by itself, but it doesn't sound perfect with everything else. One by one, you replace all the instruments. Turns out, if the original feeling of the music was good, you can replace it and it'll still feel good. But if the original feeling wasn't good, you can replace it for days and it won't feel good. In other words, the feeling is something intangible but real. There's something there. I think it has something to do with the whole Jewish passion for social justice and the African American experience of not having social justice for so long, that spoke to the Jewish experience. When the Jews first came to America and they saw what was happening, they immediately, instead of identifying up as the Irish had, because, you know, the Irish had been the blacks of England, the Black Irish, the Irish started minstrelsy as a way of getting above African Americans. The Jews immediately identified down. They immediately started calling the lynchings in the South pogroms, and in fact, you know, Black America was one of the earliest American cultures. So the Jews wanting to be American naturally looked there. So I think that when you and I say, yeah, I mean, you as Louis Armstrong, for me, it was Horace Silver. I heard a Horace Silver record and I literally thought I was related to these musicians. I felt closer to them than to some of my own family. And to this day, I'm just captivated by the sound, just the physical sound of the music. There's something so human about it. There's something that speaks of turning suffering into beauty. There's something about it that integrates humor and tragedy, you know, which in Jewish music is, you know, laughing to keep from crying. There's something very similar about these experiences in America. There is no jazz to speak of in Africa before African Americans music got back there. Go to South Africa, the music there had nothing to do with what we think of as Black music. It's an American. There's something very American about this.
I know with, you know, I was reading somewhere and it makes sense to me that, you know, cantorial music and a lot of Black music, the goal isn't precision, it's the feeling and to tell the truth. And, you know, I heard this quote that I thought could sum it up. I personally don't know if you could say this about all music, but it was a Dylan quote where someone complimented, or no, Dylan was talking about hanging out with Sam Cooke, and someone had said to Sam Cooke, they just complimented on how beautiful his voice is, and he said something like, "Thank you, but you shouldn't judge a voice by its quality. You should judge it by how much it's convincing you that it's telling the truth." And to me, I don't know if that kind of sums up the similarity, or not sums up, but speaks to some of the similarity, or if that's just something you could say about all pop.
Well, I think that's exactly what Harold Arlen's father heard. It's called intonation contouring. And in Africa, that was definitely an Africanism. The idea of in Western music is pitch. You hit a note right on the head and you are judged by how accurate you are. It's like all Western technology. It goes for precision and accuracy. But in the African experience, this idea of intonation contouring was seen as elegant, that anybody who hit a note on the head was inelegant. Similarly with rhythm, you know, the idea of rhythm in Western music is regulated by a metronome. It's a machine that marks how time passes. But in Africa and in oral, it's because of the oral tradition, really, the oral culture versus the literate culture. Rhythm is more related to, like, if you're on the shore and you hear the waves come in and out, there's a rhythm to that, but it's not perfect. It's not exact. And this idea of being able to play with rhythm having a human quality, relates it more to the human heartbeat than to a metronome, to a machine. And I think these, and this is interesting because, you know, even though Jews are the people of the book and have been literate for thousands of years, the Jewish tradition is very much an oral tradition. You know, for 500 years, what we now know as part of the Torah, they had writing, but they didn't write it down. They passed it on as this kind of a magical song. And even today, when you learn your bar mitzvah, it's done in an oral way. So there's a lot of similarities there, even though one group had the book and the other didn't.
Yeah, it reminded me of one final quote. It was someone was speaking about Billie Holiday. I think it was Jimmy Rolls actually, and they said she didn't have a voice; she had a sound.
Yes, well, there it is.
Yeah,
that's the human aspect. The sound. What does something sound like? That's part of the magic of jazz, certainly.
Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope you'll join us next week. As a nonprofit, we can only afford to put on great programming like this thanks to your support. Please visit us at neranenahArts.org for more information and to learn how to get involved.